You have rejoined us for the second class of the three-class series on mantra, a very important word in Sanskrit, and for us here in America, and I would say Europe and the West too, because I have some of my students from Iceland and Hungary and parts of India and so forth probably watching. So we are a small force, and that's probably because we so heavily emphasize Dharma and wisdom and words, as we've been talking about in the import of the mantra and the bijams, the power words in them, and the names of the deities. It's rather interesting about India that the deities have persisted and lasted so long. I mean, I don't think the Roman pantheon of gods and the Greek gods and goddesses, had that same long-lasting effect on the world. We still remember some, Zeus and so forth, and they come back in Hollywood movies at us and various things like that. But much, much, much longer in terms of millennia are these ancient wisdom beings, and because they looked back on such things as earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and assigned names to them. They were representations of gods and goddesses. Agni for fire and so forth, Varuna. And so they've looked at the earth, even the gross form of it, the Vaikari form of it, if you remember our chart in the first half, as being personifications of divinity. And if we all looked at the earth that way, then this problem that we're having with Maya and samsara might be greatly reduced. It's never going to go away because it's rather the nature of the world that's been produced by the dual mind to contain these things and keep regurgitating them, throwing them up in our faces as long as we're in form. And you could ask the gods and goddesses about that too, and they're having the same problems that we're having, only on a different level, and having warring factions. All the scriptures of the world are surrounded, take place in war, if you'll notice, and so the main scriptures. And so it's this battle against duality, and not just duality when the diversity comes in the form of scattered mind and begins to inform our thinking process in the wrong way. The unripe ego informs the chitta, or the intelligence, as we were looking at, in these lower or miscued ways. Then you have this kind of problem in Maya. But if we were to look at things then originally as deification, the way Tantra did, and we had words that were assigned to them that reminded us of divinity, like a god or a goddess, then we'd have the right idea how to use God with form. And we'd probably start making more sense out of where our ancestors went back inside of us and why we dream of them. These things would begin to be connections. What's the word again? Nadis. We'd open up subtle nerves, as you've got hundreds and thousands of them in your body, vessels, nerves, and so forth. So why should your subtle body be any different? It's just that the nadis became very subtle, and souls are actually traveling along those nadis to get into the fetus, and from this third chakra, which is connected to childbirth and digestion of food and water and so many things. And that really kind of introduces my next series of charts, these two I put side by side, that I told you that in the spirit of what we were talking about in the first half, we'd take apart a couple mantras and look at them, and it wouldn't actually take us that long to do so. This one here on my left and your right is this famous teaching out of the Gita, chapter 4, where Krishna all of a sudden, almost surprisingly, gives you this view into the divinity in everything, and based on the level of food. So we would chant there, Om Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmanahutam Brahmaivate Nagantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. Om Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmanahutam Brahmaivatena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. So this famous sloka from 4th chapter of the Gita, where Sri Krishna tells Arjuna right there in the battlefield, sort of holds within it the two poles of words. One of them being anam, food, and the other being samadhina, samadhi. So putting together these apparently very vast different principles, one being a material food and the other being samadhi, the highest level of superconscious awareness that one can attain in spiritual life, also known by words like satori and Zen and nirvikalpa and Vedanta and sampragyata in yoga and nirvana in Buddhism. So we have these great luminaries attesting to the fact that this highest samadhi is attained. And so I was just talking about how the Tantrists would look at things, air, earth, fire, water, ether, and assign them names that would remind them of the divinity of even the 5 elements, because we're talking about the great 5 divine elements. And Pancha Maha Bhutas is the word in Sanskrit. Pancha 5, Maha great, Bhutas elements. So earth, if we want to go from growth to subtle, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, we're given this very high status. They appear in solid form here, as it were, but in our dream state they also exist as 5 elements, and then they go back into their seed state in deep sleep. So such mantras then that show us that all of this is a kind of food that we're ingesting. Wisdom is also a kind of food we're ingesting. I like to say you could cook good food and sit down at the table and say your prayer over it and your mantra over it and so forth, and ingest it in a very guilt-free and very celebrative way. See, you probably should do the same thing with your scripture. You know, that it's kind of a meal you're opening up. Each page is a different element of food that needs to be taken and ingested very carefully and very subtly, and then the nutrition extracted out of it. And there's an excretion process with your physical food. There should probably also be an excretion process with your mental food. You see, that basically you're discriminating. You're shifting. I'll show you that in a minute. You're shifting. Sifting through this knowledge that you're taking in, and some of it you're leaving out of the process because it's not applicable to you, or maybe it's mixed. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that the ants at a picnic, if you go away down for a swim at the river and you've left your picnic out and you've spilled some sugar there, that they'll come and march right in, take the grains of sugar and leave the sand behind, you see. And he's not talking about the habits of ants or something, giving a biology lesson on nature. He's talking about picking up a scripture and being able to take the grains of essence out of it and leave the sand. Because he said all the scriptures of the world contain a mixture of sand and sugar in that way. So the discriminating power that you have, called viveka, is very important in that process. So again, a kind of preamble to this chart, which is a mantra, more specifically you could say a sloka out of a very powerful and renowned world scripture. And I just sang it for you. And this goes from bottom to top if we were to look at it. See, so Brahma Arpanam, Brahmarpanam. We took the two A's together and we have one word, Brahma Arpanam. So Arpanam means to offer. So devoutly offered is how we're putting that in this designation. So, and that's at the level of the Annamaya Kosha, which is what? The covering made of food. In other words, your body. So there are 5 koshas that the Atman, that surround the Atman, your true nature. Remember the witness consciousness. When it gets up and beyond the waking, dreaming, and deep sleep state and sees the whole truth of the matter, it's also got beyond the 5 koshas and knows that it's not them. It's not identified with them anymore. It can associate with them, but it's not identified with them as the reality anymore. So it's why they let loose of the world and let loose of objects and go to caves or go on retreats and so forth and so on, practice asceticisms and tapas, austerities, because they want to deepen their knowledge, intensify their higher knowledge around the truth of Dharma and Jnanam, Atma Gyan. So there you see, so we won't have to refer back to them again, Annamaya Kosha, the Pranamaya Kosha, the second covering, then the Manomaya Kosha, then the Vijnanamaya Kosha, that's the mind and the intellect, and the ego, Anandamaya Kosha. So I've put those up the side here with the world, picture of the world from space, and showing you how each one of these words in this mantram connect. Now, before we leave the description of the koshas, it would be good to see how India looked at things like the 5 elements and the 5 sheaths. This is very beautiful out of the Taittiriya Upanishad. From Atman, ether emerged. From ether, air. From air, fire. From fire, water. From water, earth. From the earth, herbs came to be, and from herbs, food. From food came the body. He indeed is the person consisting of the essence of food. So this is how you would understand in kind of a nutshell what they're saying here. Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagnau, Brahmanahutam, which we will show you why this is a mantra that not only you'd want to say over your food, but that it's going to purify your food. Because there are 5 types of impurities in food. And we're not talking here about organic or non-organic. That would be something else for you to consider in an age that's far distant from when this was uttered on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. But the 5 distortions in food have more to do with the energy that got into your food because someone handled it, or because it was grown for money, or because it was put on the market and lots of people saw it and touched it, or the person who cooked it was having a bad hair day, you see, a bad guna day, and their energy from what they were thinking about got into the food. Those are the kinds of impurities that the Dharma is talking about that you have to remove by mantra. There's no other way that you could remove those because most people aren't even aware of them. The first of those impurities has to do not enough sunlight and not enough water. So that's the only physical impurity really that teaching on the Dharma of the 5 impurities of food relates to or specifies. So that's very interesting that the other 4 are all transcendent kind of impurities. They're not things that you would usually think about when you ate at a restaurant or when you buy your food out the market, whether it's in a cheap supermarket or at a food fair somewhere. You see it. You're going to have to be thinking deeper about eating pure food. So this actually connects here too. So I want to read both these, but you can see how evolutionary-wise, this is the real evolution of things. The evolution that science and religion are both talking about takes you back in time on the physical level only. But the evolution that they're talking about here comes from inward out. From Atman, ether, that's the first element. From ether, air. From air, fire. From fire, water. From water, earth. So this is how it steps down and out. And the koshas would also tell you this. From ego to intellect, that is the intelligence in food, how the mind fashions food for consumption, how the energy gets into food, and right on down to your very body. You could also make a case for the 7 chakras having something to do with this too, because all beings everywhere are eating food, and they're consuming each other as they do so. Your body will become, they say in the Buddhist scriptures, will become a feast for others. Wolves might get it, vultures at the end, ants might get it, speaking of the ant again, fire might get it, you see, if you get cremated, and so forth. So actually your food is just there to be eaten by other beings. And all of this relates. The Taittiriya Upanishad goes on. I want to broach this because it'll make this much richer when we look at it. Because this is a story that Bhrigu, we hear about this great rishi, he says, the celebrated rishi Bhrigu approached his father, Varuna, requesting, "Revered sir, instruct me about Brahman." As a means to the knowledge of Brahman, Varuna taught him about food. Then he taught him about the vital airs. That's prana. Then sight, hearing, and speech. Bhrigu then understood food. For all beings here are born of food. Having been born, they remain alive by food. Upon departing the body, they enter into food. Having reflected on the nature of food, Bhrigu then asked Varuna, "Revered sir, now instruct me about Brahman." So it occurs in my mind 2 very important things. That food is on the mind of everyone I've ever seen in my own lifetime when they've approached the spiritual path. For some reason, everyone wants to know about the mores and the mores and less about food, you see. They're not thinking about Brahman, or they're not thinking about enlightenment so much. They want to know how food affects them. And so the beginning aspirant is very much into food. Should I fast? Should I not fast? Should I go vegetarian? Should I not go vegetarian? Should I purify my food or not purify my food? What should I eat? What shouldn't I eat? Should I give up onions and garlic and things like this? You have this whole gamut of teachings. I mean, not teachings, because Vedanta doesn't give that much teaching. I had a hard time finding this. They're not thinking so much about food in the oven and so forth that you can smell. But they're thinking more about Brahman. So to sort of check his son here, Varuna, Bhrigu comes here rather wanting to hear about Brahman, and he defers him. He says, no, you're going to hear about food first. And each one of those stages of food then he gives them, as if he's teaching them about his koshas, and he's teaching about how to purify the food you eat, so pure food can become pure blood, that can become pure thought, that can become pure mind. And that's a huge teaching for today, when people are trying to jump straight to enlightenment without any middle. You see, like 2 pieces of a sandwich, but no middle in it. See, the Dharma, the Atman, the wisdom, the elucidating part of the words that we're talking about, the mantrams, and also are sort of given up for this idea that I can somehow jump to formless enlightenment. Good luck with that. Very few can. So both this story and this line of procession from inward out bespeak of the fact that Brahman is in everything, is the soul of everything, as we said in the first half. And when it thinks, uses its mind to think, because Brahman itself doesn't think, it uses the cosmic mind to do that, that the first thoughts will be using these Mahapanchabhutas, 5 elements, because food will get nurtured. It needs air, it needs water, it needs earth. It needs fire to produce earth. So all of these things are deeply thought, and that's why you should reverence the 5 elements, the Pancha Mahabhutas, the 5 senses, the Pancha Indriyas, and you should connect them. Here's one way to connect them, you see. And if you don't know this, and your teacher thinks you may not know this, he'll steer you in that direction. And so when Brigu did hear that, he was intelligent. He said, "Oh, now I understand food. Now teach me Brahman." So it's a very, very wise way of proceeding, the guru teaching the disciple. Now that I've taken you in that, what's not definitely a sidetrack, but definitely a connecting linchpin, they call it, let's go on to Brahmahavi. So from Brahmarpanam, you go to Brahmahavi, is the sanctified article given as the oblation. And this is why they do all the rituals. Let's put some butter into that fire. Sizzle, sizzle. You see, it's all fun to watch an original puja in India with an ancient priest presiding, which I've taken you to India and shown you that before. Sometimes they've even let us make the offerings ourselves while they chant the mantras. So you'll offer things in there, food and yogurt and butter, and there'll be a big, huge smoke coming out of that. The smoke appeases the beings where? In the ether. The beings you can't see in the second world. That's the first chakra, second chakra connection. And we call it Bur and Bhuvaha, right? So Bhuvaha, Bur Bhuvaha Swaha is this mantra, you see, which I'll show you in a minute. So you're connecting these three worlds that we say Shanti, 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 because we want to bring peace into the three worlds, because they need it the most. Because if you get to the fourth world, they're not lacking peace there. They're not at war with each other. And it gets finer and finer as you go deeper and deeper to formlessness. And actually this is one way to do that, because you'll find out that the offering is Brahman. You know, there are other powerful translations of this. You sometimes hear me use them. So the Brahman is the food, Brahman is the act of offering the food, Brahman is the one who receives the food, Brahman is the one who partakes of the food, Brahman is the articles on which the food is placed, like the plates and so forth, the cups that you've sanctified. And Brahman is the vital energy in the food, pranakasha, see, and all is Brahman. Those who know this truth reach the highest samadhi. So Brahma Karma Samadhina. So I'm giving you another translation of that that's used in our meals before we partake of it, after we've offered it to the Lord. So far we have Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavi, that is, devoutly offered is the sanctified offering, the sanctified article given as the oblation. So this speaks of consciousness. So here, Lord, take this food. Oh, now that you've taken it, my senses can have it. Sometimes I've told you about a story with Swami Damodarananda, peace and bliss be upon him, in Fiji, where I went to see him. He taught me how to do puja and to make offerings. So the very first day, I was a man in my 30s, about your age probably, and he took me outside in the flower gardens behind the Fiji ashram, Ramakrishna ashram, and he had his cane, and he was beginning to use it at that age. So he looked up at the trees, and he saw a flower he wanted, so he pointed his cane to it and said, "Pick me that one." And so I reached up to pick it, and just like a stupid Western man, you see, who didn't know a thing, I began to put it to my nose as if that was a habit, and his cane tapped me on my hand. And he said, "We do not partake of things until we offer them to the Lord." So it was a very profound lesson for me, and I should have known better. I probably should have known better by then, but he, there on the grounds of that ashram, I learned that lesson about offering everything to the Lord first and to the ego second, because if you don't do that, the ego begins to take everything and the Lord disappears. And that's how you get insensitive societies. And people who just, as Holy Mother said, oh, these English people, you see, here in our country, they pick a flower off a bush and smell it, and they say, oh, what a fine fragrance. The next minute they're trampling it under their booted feet. So she didn't like to see that. She was, flowers are best either dying on the bush or offered to God, is how she put it. And not for your sense of smell, you see. So here it is, right? From ether comes air. Air is the transfer of smell, you see, to inward. And smell happens to do with the earth, right? So you're not honoring the 5 elements as they come straight from the heart of things. You're not reverencing the 5 elements and holding them sacrosanct. And you're just partaking of what they give without a second thought. And sometimes you're actually transgressing laws around that, and your ego's at fault for that. So this is how a Vedantist who's very concerned would interpret the word mindfulness. It's not just walking around carefully and being careful not to be scolded by your teacher and doing everything right, holding your teacup right and everything. See, it goes much deeper than that. There has to be an actual reverence for all things, because Brahman is in all things. So everything has to be devoutly offered to Brahman, you see. All sanctified objects are to be offered. Brahmagni, well, Agni is the god of fire, so it's got to be placed into the fire of Brahman. So here you have connections between ether, fire, and earth so far that have been made for you by this simple mantra uttered by the Lord of India, Sri Krishna. Now, look at these bubbles here. Brahmarpanam was Brahman as food, and Brahmahavir, and then Brahmagni, Brahman as energy, you see, fire. You see. Now we're going, so, and this is why I put the 5 koshas here, the 5 coverings over your Atman, those things that you're not, but which your Atman is using, because from Atman came all of those. Now the next part of the mantra goes towards the Manomaya kosha, Brahmahutam, Brahman as thought. So by Brahman alone, devoutly offered is the sanctified article given as the oblation, placed in the fire of Brahman by Brahman alone. So you don't cause a disconnect by saying, I am offering this, you see. So say you reached a level where you're not smelling the flower before it's offered, and you're not tasting the food before it's offered. You're very careful about this. And then all of a sudden you ruin it all and transgress it by saying, I am now offering this to you, Lord. Oh, it doesn't work that way. There is no I. The ego got a hold of it again, didn't it? So it's got to be offered by Brahman. So you're going to have to, and we know this because we've been taught the puja, and we know that when we sit down to do the puja, we purify ourselves with Ganges water. We do certain mudras around it, and we say certain mantras over it, and make sure that our senses are pure, you know, by doing certain nyasas. And we follow this whole tradition that's given to us by our teachers so that we can get to this level to where it's not me anymore that's doing this. I gave myself up. I'm now Brahman. So the pujari is not himself anymore. And there are mantras for this to say, I am not an ordinary person. I'm not the pujari. As I got into this, I became the Lord. So this is all the doings of the Lord here. And so bhakti yoga and puja and ceremonies and rituals all become very beautifully refined. And Holy Mother used to say that. She said, you may think by watching the mantra, the puja from the outside in, that it's just a ritual that's going on, but the pujari is having an entirely different experience of this and can sometimes see God come through the object, that is, through the image. Whether it's a picture, because Holy Mother used to say, I'd offer the food to Sri Ramakrishna as a sanctified offering, just like it says here, and I'd wait for the light to come out of Sri Ramakrishna's eyes. So he was passed by then, and she was waiting for the light to come out of the eyes of the picture of Sri Ramakrishna, because she'd worshipped that picture for years. And Sri Ramakrishna said, wherever this picture is installed and worshipped properly, I will be in the picture. So she had all this much more than hearsay. She had all this direct instruction by a great luminary about how this process works of deification of things. And how, if, like Sri Ramakrishna used to say, if God can be worshipped in an image, why can't it be worshipped in the human being? You see, why can't we worship each other as that divinity? So there you find yourself to Brahmahutam. By Brahman alone, all this is done. So you're getting rid of the idea of separation. You're getting rid of the idea of I am the agent of my action, and you're getting rid of the idea of I possess anything. Three great laws in Vedanta. I'm not the owner of anything, I'm not the agent of my actions, and I'm not separate from Brahman. It's a long-standing teaching. We grabbed onto it 25 years ago for SRV so that we could practice it, practice being those things. Because we're certainly not going to understand them from the level of our upbringing here in the West that had no worship going on in the house. I asked an Indian lady a couple days ago, well, how were you raised? And she said, well, we were doing sacrifices every day to the gods. Every day, off to the temple, you see. Well, ritualism in India has fallen, there's no doubt, and ritualism does have a tendency to fall if it's not married to Jnanam, like a beautiful teaching like this is. But nevertheless, it's certainly better than going to church once a week or something, and not getting any real clarification about how to live, how to deify your food, rather than just saying a prayer over it, as if God has anything to do with your food. God is your food, that's the connection. You don't have to ask him to bless it, you have to be God and bless it. And take all of these elements out of the quotient that are questionable. So, a running commentary on Sri Krishna's simple teaching about Brahman is the food, Brahman is everything. So far we have Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavi, Brahmagnau, Brahmanahutam. So that's all. Brahman is food, Brahman is energy, Brahman is thought. Now we get to Brahmaivatena Gantavyam, Brahman as intelligence. And so that means the one Brahman can be reached. How? By Brahma Karma Samadhini, only by those absorbed in action as Brahman. So again, now you've taken even the very actions you're engaging in, that Brahman is doing those actions. See? So everything has been transformed. You see, your body, the acts it does, your thoughts, your intellect, and your ego. Everything has been transformed into what it should have been all along. You see, everything came from Atman, and I'm just going back to Atman. And I shouldn't take very much time doing that. You see, and pretty soon, every morsel of food I take, I cannot put it in my mouth without thinking of that mantra. By mistake, and I've seen people do it, they take some food, oh, I forgot to bless that, they'll take it out of their mouth, you see, right there at the dinner table. So, I'm sorry, Lord, So it really is, like Holy Mother said, and Lord Vashishta, long before her, said, any piece of food taken into the mouth that isn't blessed turns to poison in your bloodstream. So you're thinking about, oh, I ate some meat, or oh, I ate some inorganic food. That doesn't not necessarily turn into poison, especially if you only do it once or twice. You might choose better food, but you might choose something completely different. And now for something completely different. You see the way you're going to look at the whole process of food as Brahman. So when Sri Krishna comes forward with this, and Arjuna hears it on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, this is like, it's almost like saying, this whole battle and everything was unnecessary. If you and the Kaurava clan had have both practiced this, there would be no war, you see. So how important these teachings are to any culture, any society, at any given age and time. in any millennia or in any yuga. So I actually concluded the mantra there to go on because this was a half sentence. The one Brahman can be reached only by those absorbed in action as Brahman. Brahma karma samadhina. See? So we've interpreted that to say all karmas will be neutralized and you'll reach the highest state of samadhi if this is followed. See? And there at the level of Vijnanamaya Kosha was Brahman as intelligence, finally Brahman as bliss. So now you can see why the rishis wrote in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and others, the corn is conferring bliss upon us. Our crops conferring bliss upon us. Our children are conferring bliss upon us. Wouldn't that be nice to say that about our children of the Kali Yuga? There are other things you could say about them right now. So all of this is by following the Dharma and the traditions in certain ways, understanding the connections, and this is simply a sloka or a mantra, if you wish, out of the Gita, one of the world's greatest landmarks in scriptural history, Bhagavad Gita, the words of Sri Krishna. Now, enough said, you might say. That's a mouthful of food, isn't it? Because it shows all your 5 koshas, it shows how Brahman becomes each of these things, and how you follow the tradition, how everything evolves out of divine reality, and should probably never be seen to have departed divine reality when it made this journey outward. See? That's the Advaitic way. It's the Advaitic piece of wisdom behind this, is that no transformation ever happened. I never ate anything. I never had to purify anything. It was all Brahman from the get-go. And there's no getting and going in it either, so words kind of fail me here. All right, so let's look at the Gayatri, because that's the other very more famous, chanted by millions of people a day, this mantra, and maybe many times a day. Sometimes I take some of the American youth to India, and so if I haven't done it by the time we reach India, if we fly into Calcutta or Delhi or Chennai, while we're waiting, and there's a long wait to get through the lines to get into the country, I say, oh, I forgot, I have to teach you the Gayatri mantra before you come to India. Please repeat this after me. See, and so we do. We go right through it. See, and for instance, Om Bhur-Bhuva Swaha Tat Savitur-Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimohi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. So this is the famous Gayatri mantra, and I'm singing off of a copy of a compilation I made that has about 14 or 15 other Gayatris on it. Like one to Durga, one to Kali, one to Saraswati, one to Lakshmi, one to Uma, one to Sita, one to Radha, one to Savitri, one to Tara, one to Tulsi, one to Sharda, and one to Ramakrishna, the Ramakrishna Gayatri. Those last 2 being the newest additions to the Gayatris, since the Sita and Rama and the Radha and Krishna of this age has come again, as Vivekananda said, when Sharda and Ramakrishna came to earth. So there are many, many powerful Gayatris then that you could sing, and I put it into a musical form here. But this first one, of course, is paramount and best known, and like I say, chanted by millions of people, sometimes hundreds of times a day in the case of the Brahman caste. So if we were wanting to look at a very clear, cogent version of that, I've tried to provide that for you here. Here's one translation. On that adorable splendor of the divine creatrix, may we meditate. May she our thoughts inspire, who is beyond all darkness. Om. So that's from the Tripura Tapini Upanishad. And we've taken that Upanishad in retreat. When I looked at the 108 Upanishads, I found at least 7 that were to the Divine Mother. And they don't really get much emphasis on them, like the Situ Upanishad and the Yoga Kundalini Upanishad and so forth. So this one I looked into, Tripura Tapini Upanishad, was one that we studied on retreat over the last years. And that's the definition or description I got out of that particular version. So it's actually, again, quite easy to go through, because I told you both these charts would be easy of consumption, because this is something that we're drinking in like a great elixir together, and proving again the power of words, and that they've been used for thousands of years to purify, uplift, inspire, and create nadis that go straight to enlightenment, as if to bring everything that's problematic or backwards or unseemly and just eliminate it and just pull it into one firm, non-dual insight that will free you for all time. But it is a mouthful. Om Bhur Bhuvaha Swaha is 3 worlds of 7, if you want to call them again, Svadhisthana, Muladhara, Svadhisthana, and Manipura, the first 3 chakras. And then Anahata, Vishuddha, Agya, and Sahasrara, the other 4 worlds. So sometimes those 7, they say, oh, there's 3 below and 3 above, is how the scriptures say that. And what are they talking about? The 7 chakras. The one in the middle is the basis for everything, the heart. If you're at the heart, you have no fear, you have no suffering, you have no rebirth unless you want it. But the 3 below, take caution, all those who venture there, you see. And the 3 above, I'm gone and gone forever, as Buddha said. Don't have any hope for me for the worlds anymore. So these 3 worlds, at least in this definition, because there is a way of saying 3 worlds that means immanent, transcendent, and absolute. Don't think about that right now, as it were. That's another 3-word world designation, which really takes all 7 and puts them into this 3 below, 3 above, and 1 in the middle. The one we're looking at right now is Bhur Bhuva Swaha. That's specifically outlined in the scriptures to mean earth, Bhur, or Bhutas, where earthly beings are, and also departed spirits of a lower kind who didn't make it to heaven, they say, are also in the Bhur Loka. And Bhuvar Loka is where the elementals are, and Svarloka is where the heavenly hosts are, ancestors, celestials, asuras, who aren't completely demonic. So basically there's this pantheon, gradated pantheon of beings by the hundreds and thousands, billions probably, in these 3 worlds. And some of them are in a disembodied state, and some of them have come back again to the body. And this is, of course, where nadis would be important to know, how souls, like I often like to say, just to kind of impress people, well, since I started speaking 2.5 hours ago, hundreds of people have died and hundreds of people have been reborn. Where have they gone and where do they come from? See, well, India's always known that, along these nadis, according to their karmas. Souls who chanted this all their life and understood this, they're not coming and going anymore, most likely. And if you want to know about that, then the Gayatri will help explain it. So what does it say? Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha, the first 3 words, or 4 words, don't forget Om. The Supreme, assuming the guise of the Trinity, comes to be styled as the goddess Tripuri. By her power are fashioned the 3 abodes, earth, atmospheres, and heaven. Her bijam, hrim, along with its terrible power, permeates the terminus of these three peaks, emanating from the junction between her two eyebrows, which is the seat of equilibrium of the three gunas, and where the world of objects gets dissolved. Now, go somewhere under a tree in a forest and meditate on that for a couple months. Every day, memorize it. So when next time you say Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha, you'll know this is all under the auspice of Tripuri. 1, 2, 3. These are the three forms of the goddess called Tripura Sundari. Her outer form, her inner form, her transcendent form, and then no form at all. So, and we end this with Om Shanti 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 again. Why? Because even though it's an impossible feat, it'll never happen, we want to bring peace to the three worlds. You have to say that knowing that it's never going to happen. The only time peace is ever going to come to the three worlds is when Shiva will dissolve them. And that's called Maha Pralaya. At the end of a long, long set of ages, 4 yugas, Mahayuga, there will be a Mahapralaya where everything is dissolved. But since it was never created, it can't be destroyed. So it's going to go back to seed form. Your seed form, if you're not illumined, is going back to ignorance and rebirth. That's your seed form. All the tattvas go back to words, like Varuna, you see, or Agni. Fire will go back to the thought fire in God's mind, so it never dies. It's just not, it's now in potential, they call it, you see. And this is why they mentioned here equilibrium. Her terrible power permeates the terminus of these three peaks. So they're looking at this as three great inner lands, you see, that you have to traverse, you have to work through, and hopefully transcend. And it emanates between the junction in her two eyebrows, which is the seat of equilibrium of the three gunas. So tamas, rajas, and sattva, which when they got knocked out of equilibrium, formulated the worlds, you see. And why we're trying in meditation to get beyond the three gunas, so we get back to peace, you see. I can't begin in a few minutes to explain this. I could go on and on with things I've heard, things I know, and my own meditations on it, but we'll never finish this chart. This is enough to hopefully tantalize you, because this is one of the most beautiful pieces of information you'll ever get about the three worlds that has connected to it the Vakdevi, the Divine Mother, Saraswati, which is a Gayatri we could sing at this point for her. Saraswati Gayatri Om Hamsavahini Vidmahe Sarva Shukla Dimohi Saraswati Prachodayat. So Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha, and the next breath, Tat. Just that word alone receives its own special attention. Tat, really, an English word is that. There's a book on the shelf right here. It says, I am that, you see. So it means I am Brahman. There's really no difference between this apparently individualized self and the Supreme Self. From the standpoint of the koshas there is, because God doesn't have any coverings. But I'm the Atman that has taken on coverings, you see. So I have these coverings that now stand as a sort of fivefold separation from me and Brahman. So that's why I say I am not the body, I'm not energy, I'm not mind, I'm not intellect, and I'm not the ego. Every day of my life I say that to myself if I'm a non-dualist practitioner or somebody practicing the neti-neti style of practice and so forth. So, Tat is verily the eternal Brahman, the indefinable, impeccable, unconditional, and unconstrained. It thinks, perceives, evolves, and desires the status of consciousness. Thus it evolves as a visible world. Its desiring is done through ascetics, mystics, seers, and their sacrifices. What is desired is born. Being free of desires, it holds sway over all beings. It puts forth letters like T, A, T. Therefore, Tat is desireless desire. Whoso knows all this becomes the Lord. If these words get to you, then you're a Vedantist, because this is simply Upanishad. This is the Tripura Tapini Upanishad I got this out of. And it hasn't been commented on by Shankara. This is one of those minor or hidden Upanishads, where if you begin to look through 108 Upanishads, you'll find gems like this everywhere strewn. And yes, it may be ancient wisdom and configured in such a way that it was understood in those ancient times, but through the power of words, Mother makes it accessible to us and inspires us even at such a late date in this Kali Yuga, see, this age of ignorance, where all 4 quarters of your spiritual wisdom has been lost. That's how they describe this age, Kali Yuga. Again, much to say there, but the live streaming can look back on it, and if they want to, or go grab a copy of the Minor Upanishads, read or come to one of my retreats where we have studied this before. But let's go on with the mantram, the great Gayatri. Om Bhur-Bhuva Swaha Tat, then what? Savitur Varenyam. The root supreme means to give birth to living beings. Savitur thus gives birth to all that lives. Power gives birth. This primeval power is Tripura, the supreme sovereign. God is great, with earrings adorned, in sphere of fire residing. Varenyam means best, adorable. Whoever knows this gains all pervasiveness. So let's then sing one of the Gayatris to Savitur. Here's the Savitri Gayatri. Sri Savitri Gayatri Om Jnana Shakti Vidmohe Vedanga Dharini Dhimohi Tano Savitri Prachodaya. So to recap and see how many words are in these power words. See, what you have here is these many-syllabled Gayatri mantra, which just has a collection of words. Then you have the Tripura Tapani Upanishad, the rishis, giving you more words to what those mean. Then you have my commentary on top of that. So you can see how just these few power words could and should burgeon into outward into these words, right into the very food we eat, through our energy, through our mind, through the thoughts. If we're holding this one principle of Brahmarpanam, that Brahman is all, then we should hold Sankrisakt, the whole process of in a state of oneness, see, or non-duality. So the last part of this Gayatri mantra says Bhargo Devasya Dimohi. Bhargo Devasya Dimohi means Da denotes the highest bearing. Bharga signifies the shining one who dwells at the center, who is imperishable, who is the imperishable fourth. Remember, the imperishable fourth. See. It is the innermost of all, The syllable ma denotes greatness, inertness, solidity. Mohi denotes the earth, what is gross, like seas, mountains, islands, and forests. The word devasya represents the presiding deities. So you can see that the whole thing comes around full circle to include all what we called earlier in this class the tattvas. You see, air, earth, fire, water, and ether, forest, plants, islands, and so forth, our beautiful Hawaii Islands that we live here, all to be traced back there to that point between her eyebrows, where pure intelligence resides, in which all these words were formulated that actually produced all of this. Because you know, in India, God does not produce things, the mind produces things. It's called sankalpa. And when you get billions of souls entering into sankalpa together, that's a lot of power that can produce a lot of worlds. And if you don't believe it, then just go back to at least 3 of them, which you may be familiar with. Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha. So, Bhargo Devasya Dimohi Diyo Yona Prachodayat, as the Brahmin priest will say, means to meditate upon the Supreme Self, Sadashiva, who renders us speechless, inspires our thoughts, and who takes us far beyond the sphere of desire for conceptualization to transcendental reality. So, just mention conceptualization, all these beings engaging in sankalpa, and basically the inward moving sadhaka or aspirant will reach a state of transcendence where, as Holy Mother was to say to us not too long ago, when one reaches enlightenment, one sees that everything is in Maya, gods, goddesses, worlds, it's all in Maya. Only Mother, my Mother, exists at that time. That's a direct quote from her. Only Mother, my Divine Mother, exists at that time. So that's all indrawn back to her, the primordial Shakti, who exists in Brahman like fire and heat, like water and its wetness. Here's something that you might want to include when you say this mantra from the Saraswati Rahasya Upanishad. We also studied that Mother Upanishad. Without taints I am, being, knowing, loving, I am. Self-shining, devoid of duality, I am. To these words, confirm. To these words, conform, Well, both. Confirm them and conform to them. So, without taints I am, being, knowing, and loving. That's Satchidananda right there. Pure being, pure knowing, that's Sat and Chit, and pure loving, Ananda, that pure bliss. Self-shining, devoid of duality I am. So this is Divine Mother Saraswati's own declaration in her own Upanishad. Saraswati Rahasya. Rahasya means what? Secret. At the end of these Mother Upanishads, all of this is Divine Mother, and she is the supreme secret. See? So she veils herself. Sometimes the great seers sing to that, and about her being that way. Prakritim paramam abhayam varadam nararupadaram janatapaharam sharanagata sevika toshakarim pranamami param jananim jagatam. Mother, supreme in human form, granter of boons and bliss, distress of our souls, remove us doubt. Grant us contentment and peace. thy children who offer all to thee, do thou makest them content and free. O great Mother of the worlds, be our salutations ever unto thee. O Mother, supreme and modest veil, release their children from all trials and travail. For thou art the only ship to carry across this earthly sea. Great Mother of the worlds, be our salutations ever unto thee. Written in this age by Swami Advaitananda to Holy Mother Sri Sharda, who is Saraswati in this age. So, a rather relatively quick run through the Gayatri, but you can see how just this half hour of class on it, what to speak of the food that we looked at, food mantra, gives you an example of the power of mantras. Of course, your mantra given to you by the Guru is much shorter in most cases, and that's probably good for you in the stages that you want to work your way through inwardly, opening up nadis as you should be thinking about it, to an extent where you reach a very high level of realization. And as I like to say sometimes, Sri Aurobindo used to say, be able to go up and down the amber stairs of birth and death. So I would say that happens when you wake, sleep, and go into deep sleep, wake, dream, and go into deep sleep and come back. It also happens when you're born, live, and pass away from the body. And it happens every time you take an in-breath, a held breath, and an out-breath. That's how you should be thinking of this all-pervasive mother intelligence that operates the functions of everything here. Like the question I answered for that student, what does Hrim mean? Well, that's Ha means all the physical tattvas, and Ra means all the subtle tattvas, out of which the gross tattvas came, and Ha Ra E means the deep sleep state, and M dissolves it all. Hrim. So that's where she puts it all to rest, calls it all back into her, to the point between her two eyebrows, is so nicely said here. So if you've done the food mantra lightly, just to say it as some sort of a blessing that you hope will work, or if you've learned the Gayatri and memorized it, and you say it each day in your meditation at the end of meditation, because it's a very good, may we always and ever meditate on the radiant effulgence of the Supreme Being. May she protect the three worlds. Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha. If you've said that and you haven't imbued it with your Jnana Yoga yet, with your mantra, with what it means, every word, what it means, then you still have some work to do to make that concrete inside of you and help you make the connections. Because that will take you out of and through the first Vaikari stage into the Madhyama stage and into the Pashanti stage, the Tripura Sundari. As they say about Tripura Sundari, the triple aspect of the goddess is, and we learned this at retreat recently when we gave the retreat on that, it's called Tripura Upanishad. They say that you're in a certain city, you see, it's called the world, and there's lots of goings on there with lots of ignorance and lots of problems and lots of talking about it with not getting anywhere, as we said earlier. Then you find your guru and get this mantra, and it's like, you know, it's like reaching down into polluted waters with her hand and grabbing you by the collar of your shirt or your garment and lifting you up and putting you instantaneously in this new world. That's the third world of Tripura Sundari. So you're no longer in the physical world anymore, even though your body acts there and so forth. And these mantras are helping confirm that for you. Every time you say this, either one of them, it's like, I am a citizen of the third world of Tripura Sundari. And it won't be long before I become a citizen of her inner world, where I can see her form in my visions, in my meditations, in my dreams. And after that, reach a transcendental state where I will merge in her. And that's all the three cities. That Pura, Tripura, the three cities is what that means. And Sundari means, oh, the most beautiful. She's the most beautiful occupant of all three cities that belong to the mantra, with its 3 stages or 4 stages, with its 14 facts, and with its 21 steps. And with more that you will learn next week when we talk about Shakti mantra. And what else? Oh, the sword of discrimination, which takes you up and above common everyday mantras to the powerful mantras which transform you. So here, then, let's end with a Sanskrit chant. Om Tachnayo, Om Tachnayo Ravrini Mahe, Gatung Yagyaya, Gatung Ye Nupataye, Daivi Svastrastu Naha, Svastir Manusebhyaha, Urdvam Jigatu Bhesajam, Sangnawastu Dvipade Sangchatushpate, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Come, let us make a deep and humble offering of the small self into the great self. May we always revere this offering and always delight in it and in the presence of all the gods and goddesses. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace come into the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity then also abide among us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.